Okay, another massive weekend of club hurling has just gone by. Michael Verney, we can't ignore the biggest story of the lot, which is that Ballyhale Shamrocks, they're 2 games in, they've just a single point which they salvaged late on against Tullaroan with no Reid goal. But they're after losing by 9 points to O'Loughlin Gales, 221 to 18 points. Probably a bit too early to panic though if we go back and look at 2019 when they were also kind of struggling early on and ended up winning the All-Ireland.
Yeah, we were probably having the same conversation last year and ended up in the relegation semi-final and got massive momentum then and won the Kilkenny Championship, nearly probably pull it up in the end, and then ended up winning the All-Ireland then with a fair degree of comfort coming the whole way through Leinster and even at the All-Ireland semi-final and final stages. So no, I definitely won't be writing them off. As we said in recent weeks, new manager, Colin Fennelly out with a hamstring injury, Darren Mullen was out as well. No Henry on the line, no Mick Fennelly on the field, probably a lot of leaders, Adrian Mullen missing as well. So it's probably only natural. It's probably from their point of view they wouldn't want to be losing, obviously, but they've come up against a good side. Tullaroan were very, very competitive, obviously, against the Village this week as well, having drawn with Ballyhale last week. O'Loughlin's were one of the top teams generally for the last 10 or 15 years, and they're a good side with a good kind of Kilkenny spine to them, good spine of Kilkenny players, so it's not that surprising. They're going to probably take a while to get more, and they have kind of a bit of time on their side, but they're obviously not going to like being defeated either, so be interested to see how they bounce back over the next couple of weeks. You'd still fancy them to bounce back and really be in the equation at the end.
Yeah, Jack Nolan and Conor Kelly got the goals for O'Loughlin Gales, and like as I said, played against them not so long ago with Cuala, and they look good, and having a spine of a defence that has Hugh Lawler and Paddy Deegan, you're never going to be too far away, really, are you?
No, definitely not. And I know you mentioned about Robbie Buckley up in the forwards as well. He kind of, one of the reasons maybe he hasn't played with Kilkenny or hasn't been in around there, he's a bit slight, as you said, but he, in sixth year in Kilkenny CBS, having played 3 All-Ireland finals, I think the years before, he decided to kind of focus on soccer and didn't actually play with CBS when he was in his 6th year. He went and he was playing with Waterford FC, I think, or Waterford United, or as they're called, and that's probably, he kind of went away from hurling for a couple of years. So that's probably one of the reasons maybe he's not in with Kilkenny, but definitely a pretty exciting talent. They've got a load of really good players. I remember chatting to Mark Bergen a couple of years ago when they were beaten in the Leinster final. Who were they beaten by? Was it Oulart? No, it wasn't Oulart. I can't remember who they were beaten by. Yourselves, actually. Beaten by your good selves, yeah. And they had won Faythe All-Irelands, going back, 10 years ago. Loads of underage talent coming through. So it's hardly surprising they're going to be in around, the last 2 or 3 in Kilkenny for the next 5 or 6 years, realistically.
Yeah, you tend to have to play a lot of games to win the Kilkenny Championship. There's always those groups of 6, so you get those 5 games and you really do find out. I think you find out yourself what your best team is. It's not like, in a lot of competitions you might play 2 games and you're already knocked out and you just fulfill the final fixture if you have a group of 4. You really get a chance to figure out what your best team is, and if a team isn't going right, they have a chance to right the ship. So I think this Kilkenny Championship, normally the cream rises towards the end of the season, so it's very early to be writing off Ballyhale Shamrocks, especially when they have those 2 All-Irelands behind them. Moving on to Bennett's Bridge against Danesford. So interestingly enough, Danesford went 7 points to 1 ahead after 12 minutes, but Bennett's Bridge completely took over from there. Jason Clear, he scored a couple of goals for Bennett's Bridge from penalties, and the bitter rivals, as we were talking last week. Nice for Bennett's Bridge to get this one over the neighbours.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say it's a friendly rivalry. It's a fairly bitter rivalry. Well, I believe Liam Blanchfield was pulled down for the 2 goals, and I believe he was pulled down by Paul Murphy for the 2 of them. He's that sort of player at club level. If he gets ahead up his team, he's going to be very, very hard to stop. So Jason Clear kind of converted the 2 of them, and really that was the difference. They won by 5 and 2 goals or 6, so that was the difference in the game, really.
And in the Aaron's Own Clara game, Michael Murphy hit 111. That's kind of the standout. And Conor Delaney, very good for Aaron's Own. And the fact that they did this without Conor Fogarty, that's fairly impressive. Like, this is a Clara team that only won a county title there, I think, 4 years ago, and they're obviously full of very good players.
Yeah, like a 10-point defeat, in fairness, without Conor Fogarty is probably not something you expect. But as you say, Conor Delaney's looks like a really, really good player, possibly a good player county level for the next 5 or 6 years as well. Kieran Wallace, I believe, was very good, and no more than O'Loughlin's, I think they have an awful lot of young lads coming through, and I think they kind of needed some kind of fresh blood to come through, and I think they have it now. An interesting one in the other game there as well. Dixborough, who I believe. Killian Buckley is back to himself now, totally back to himself, having worries there even about his career there at one stage with his knees, but I believe he's really back to himself. They gave Greg Ballycallan a decent bet, 24 points to 13. This might probably be the only time it will ever happen, but Shane Stapleton, not you of course, was man of the match with 10 points, 7 from frees. I don't think that'll ever happen in any big game up in Dublin. And I believe Greg Ballycallan are going poor, and I think Billy Ryan is missing at the moment, and you know, a club like that can't afford to be missing someone like that, a target man who could be getting 1-3 or 1-4 a game for them. So I think they're struggling. The roar in the Stieg and Mullinavat drew, which is actually a surprise because Mullinavat probably would have been expected to win that, and I believe Richie Latty's out for the foreseeable with a really bad hamstring injury suffered in recent weeks, so he'd be a massive loss for the roar. But they did well get a result against Mullinavat without him.
And then James Stephens beating Tullaroan 22 points to 18. And I did wonder if for Tullaroan coming up and meeting the 2 county finalists from last year at senior level, coming up from intermediate, whether that would take a toll. Now maybe it did. Now you were talking about how recently in the previous game that Owen Larkin and Jackie Tyrrell not playing. That was the first time since maybe 2001 that the club fielded without them. He came back and he played centre back. Conor Brown's supposed to be brilliant. Interesting about Conor Brown, he was midfield here scoring 5 from play. And Brian Cody had him midfield last year, but played him corner back a lot during the league.
Yeah, he's too much of an engine to be cornerback in my opinion. I think he's a box to box player, and in particular, he looks like at the moment he'd probably develop a good bit more into maybe more of a kind of a rampaging midfielder who'd be able to get on the score sheet. Clearly, he's able to do it at club level with 5 from play, but he was more of a stopper at different stages last year with Kilkenny. I think he could develop. He obviously has the great pedigree as well, son of Kilkenny Camogie legend Angela Downey, obviously as well. He formed a midfield partnership with Keane Kenny, who was centre back the week before. Owen Larkin slipped back into centre back. Keane Kenny went to midfield and hit 4 as well, so they had 9 points from midfield. I believe Keane Kenny's a really, really good prospect. I think he played for Kieran's last year. Very, very good player. And again, the Village are doing that without Luke Scanlon, who's missed the first 2 games with a hamstring injury as well. One of many players that has picked up hamstring injuries since club action resumed again. Just a couple of interesting results from the Intermediate Championship. Richie Powers over Carrickshock this year. Obviously, we all know him as a brilliant player. He's gone into management now, having been forced to retire with very, very bad knee injuries. They beat O'Loughlin Gales, the second team. And then we mentioned Angela Downey there with her sister Anne is over Ballyraggett. And they're really, really struggling, and it's a surprise really. They're all from 2 in their 2 games, and when you look at the talent that they have, I was chatting to someone in Kilkenny and they said, you know, he listed out the talent to me that they have, and they really should be a steady senior team. The likes of the Brennans, Kevin Kelly, Stephen Staunton, those sort of lads, they should be a competitive senior team. I'm not sure what's going on at the moment. They're definitely not putting their best foot forward at the moment though.
Yeah, sure, they were in All-Ireland final just a couple of years ago at intermediate level, so to be struggling at intermediate within your county now, they definitely need to right the ship quickly. We jump on to the Waterford Championship, and what stood out was the 10-37 that Dungarvan and Lismore shared. So 6-18 to Dungarvan, 4-19 to Lismore. Ray Barry with a hat-trick. That's quite an incredible scoreline. And you know what, as much and all as Dungarvan will be delighted with their scoreline, and maybe Lismore will be thinking, we're through anyway, to concede that amount of scores, that is alarm bells for any club.
No, it really is. I don't know what it is. Every time Lismore play, Morris puts up a massive score, but there's always a really big score usually shipped at the other end as well. I don't know. Imagine being at that game. Imagine being one of the lucky 200 or the lucky 110 or 20 people in the stands watching that game. Like, she would have just imagine being a poor reporter trying to report that, or doing on the blow kind of report that. But yeah, very entertaining stuff as always when Lismore and the Shannons are involved.
There was a link went out, or a clip of the red card that Austin Gleeson got in Mount Sion's 221-17 point loss to Rowan Moore. I'll put it in under the video on ourgame.ie. But what did you think? Did you think it was a red card? I watched it a couple of times like yourself, and we haven't talked about it though. And I think it probably was a red card. And this is Austin Gleeson, who is in ripped shape. Like, he looks like an absolute animal at the moment. He came in, I think it wasn't flush on the shoulder. And if you miss coming in at that pace, I think he was probably unlucky because he meant to just burst him on the shoulder. I think it was probably a red.
I think it's very unlucky, I have to say. I think it's really unlucky. I'd like to see another angle and another view of it. I don't know if it was flush on the shoulder, but there was definitely absolutely no intent. There was no shoulder up or anything like that. He's obviously a tall enough fella, probably about 6'2". He actually leaned down into it, and it's the height of irony, really. The more ripped and strong you are, the more force there's going to be. So if he, a byproduct of him being in really good shape at the moment is he's obviously got way more power, and it had way more of an impact and looked worse maybe than it actually was. I'd like to see another angle of it. I don't personally think it was a red card, as a lot of people are saying. I know Brian Flannery, that used to play with Waterford, is saying that you'd be nearly lifted shoulder high off the field in Kilkenny if you did something like that, and the referee would just wave play on or whatever. So I didn't think it was a red card. As I said, I didn't think there was any intent whatsoever. Just his natural height, maybe on a guy that was just a couple of inches shorter. I don't think there was any intent.
But the intent doesn't matter. If you burst the lad into, like, whether it's the chest or into the back, and you're going full force, I don't know. I think the issue is you've kind of gone in, you've steamed in, and you've taken the lad out of it, and it's dangerous. Now, I'm not, and like yourself, I don't think there was any intent, but I think he mistimed it, and unfortunately when you go in that hard, you're going to have to go.
I definitely think he got a fair whack of his shoulder. It wasn't straight through his back, or it wasn't straight through his chest.
We'd need a slow-mo to be 100% sure, but just moving on.
It's a really difficult one for a referee, without being smart. Difficult one for a referee, because you're seeing this, and it was an unbelievable hit. It was a car crash hit, really, and you're forced to make a judgment call on it.
And you wonder now the ramifications of that. I'll just run through the other fixtures, and then we'll look at the quarter-final draw in Waterford. So Ballygunner beat Passage 220 to 15 points. Passage, the last team to beat Waterford in the championship in 2013 county final, amazingly. De La Salle, they beat Adbyside 315 to 15 points. Now we'll come on to the quarter-final draw, which is Passage against Rowan Moore. So Rowan Moore will obviously be buzzing after beating Mount Sion. Ballygunner against 4 Mile Water. De La Salle against Mount Sion, and Abbey Courtney against Lismore. So Austin Gleeson, unless the red card gets rescinded, it's looking like he's going to miss the De La Salle game, which is huge. De La Salle are obviously a very strong team, got to the county final last year, and they'll definitely fancy this if Austin isn't playing.
Oh, without a doubt, he's their talisman, really. Like they'll be a pale shadow of the team that they could be or can be without him. He'd be a massive loss. That's an incident that will probably cost them any interest in the championship if he does miss the next game.
Quite a shock to see in the Wexford Championship that St Martin's are gone out to the quarter-final stage, losing 20 points to 111 against Glyn Barntown. So that's John Myler's season 1. He won't be happy going out this early.
No, definitely not. And I suppose all the conversation was throughout the winter when he was announced as St Martin's manager, and when Derek McGrath was brought in as coach. That was the big one. Maybe the two of them will meet at some stage, and it's quite high-profile appointments or high-profile people coming to both of those clubs, and neither of them are in the last four, which is a big one. But by all accounts, I think the Martins can have no complaints. Glyn Barntown were by far the better side, and it's funny, unlike other years maybe where the Martins were mixing hurling and football at the same time, and maybe caught between two stools and lads playing week on week. They're playing week on week, but they've been playing hurling week on week. So little excuse really for not putting their best foot forward, and they clearly didn't.
You can't be putting up 111 in 111 in summer hurling. 60 minutes you put up 111 when you know the weather's good. I mean, you're just not going to win games like that.
No, definitely not. You're not going to. It's funny, we talked about here last week. I know someone wrote a comment in after and said Martins are going to walk Wexford, and I was kind of just thinking, like, it's competitive. It's competitive, as in teams can be, as we see. We'll walk through the results in a second, and you'll clearly see that any team can beat any other team on a given day, and that was the case the other night. It was Glyn Barntown's night. The only thing from their point of view now is they've taken the big scalp. I was chatting to the Shells boss after their match yesterday. He said it has been blown open, but from Glyn Barntown's point of view, like, they need to push on now. They've taken a scalp. They need to push on again and get back through to the final again. They don't want to beat the best team, as invariably happens. Beat the best team, then you get beaten yourself, and then you're out, and you've done all the hard work for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely, and it happens time after time. But that Shelmaliers Faythe Harriers game, that was on TV on Sunday on TG Carr. Entertaining enough game, but it just always felt like Shelmaliers had Faythe Harriers at arm's length. And I'd spoken to you recently about playing against Faythe Harriers, and I thought this is a really, really good team, but there's so many young players in there, it might take a few years to come. But after watching them there, it might come back to that old saying, they're a year away from being 2 years away from being a good team.
Yeah, no, they probably are. They've a lot of really, really good young players, but like quite raw now, like quite physically quite raw. There's a couple of interesting things about the match actually. In the warm up, Faythe Harriers were doing something I never really seen done before, not at club level anyway. They were doing a real dynamic warm up with medicine balls. So they were firing medicine balls and following, going to the back of the line. Never really seen it. Obviously, I'd never have seen it done on a pitch before. They were obviously doing it on the sideline. So that I thought that was interesting. Derek McGrath was kind of orchestrating things before the match, and that they tried to play a kind of a short game, and it didn't look like it necessarily suited them. Elder players kind of like Jim Berry and Richie Keogh, who maybe would have been used to playing a more traditional side, it kind of looked like they were doing things that maybe weren't that comfortable to them, and they had a sweeper up most of the time, or maybe not necessarily a sweeper but a 7 defender, and we're definitely only playing 2 inside or maybe 1 inside at times. Chin ended up inside a couple of times, lead Chin, but he was marked very, very well by Brian Malone, of course, who we know as a Wexford footballer. Probably not the most naturally talented hurler, but we talked about whether Simon Donoghue would track him. Brian Malone was probably actually an obvious candidate to track him if we kind of known a bit more about it, because physically he was able to kind of match up well with him. Now Chin did give the killer pass for Richie Lawler's goal before half time. Shells were leading 10-5. That was 10-1-5. Then Chin won a ball a couple of minutes later and was fouled. Dubious enough penalty. Rattled it off the post.
I actually did think it was a penalty when I watched it back, and I'd be more sort of a defender, but I did feel that he was spoiled in the air to the point that he was about to catch the ball and then he was pushed away from it, so, and not by legal means, so I thought it was a penalty. And what a beautifully struck penalty it was too. That could have changed the game. Like, obviously Faythe Harriers were relying on the goal they had gotten beforehand to even be in the game. Like, they were definitely second best, but if you get a goal at that stage, you never know, knock another ball or two into Lee Chin and it might cause pandemonium, but they needed it.
Yeah, well, it's like this. If they'd finished with a scoreline of something like 4-10, they could have won the game. They were going to need to probably hit a couple of goals. Funny enough, they didn't trouble the Shells goal thereafter. It was funny just chatting to Derek McGrath after. He kind of intimated that he would like to stay on again next year. It looked like he was really enjoying it, to be honest with you. And they were in a kind of a huddle after the match, and he was kind of the one kind of directing things there as well. And as myself and Gordon Manning from the Sun were kind of waiting to chat to him, a lot of players were coming over, shaking hands, thanking him and that kind of thing. And just chatting to him after, it kind of seems like it's a kind of a project that he really enjoys, I think. I believe the manager, who's Sack Walsh, I think is his name, and Lee Chin went down and met Derek McGrath in Waterford last year and sold the whole thing to them, basically, that they were an underachieving side in relegation the last couple of years, and they just thought they were a bit better than that. It seems like he's kind of really bought into the project. Interesting, it was different. We talked before about there been a couple of thousand at Faythe Harriers' first training session this year. There was obviously anything less than a couple of thousand. There was only 200 players included at the match yesterday, so I just thought that was a bit different as well. Funny enough, actually, the referee, Justin Heffernan, the way when teams are doing their halftime talks and that on the sideline now, halftime never lasts as long as it would if you're in a dressing room, because you're not sitting down, you're not comfortable. It's not, let them go out, or they gone out and let them go out and then you come out or whatever. So the teams were both out maybe 7-8 minutes after half time, and they were waiting for about 2 minutes for the referee to come out, who'd obviously gone inside, or I don't know if he was having a cup of tea or what he was doing, but they were waiting for the referee to come back out, and he got a few cat calls coming back out into the pitch. But it was interesting. I was just chatting to the Shells manager after, Vinnie Parker, and he was just saying they're one of the junior clubs that are really benefiting from just playing hurling at the moment. I was chatting to Brian Malone, and he said as well, their whole team the football team is the hurling team. So he said they're not playing hurling 1 week and then trying to transfer the skills to football and then change back. They're just playing hurling, and they both kind of think that that will benefit them. Just focusing on the one code. They obviously won the hurling last in 2014, got a bit of a monkey off their back because I think they've been beaten in 4 quarterfinals since then. They won the football in 18, so they're one of the sides with probably a really realistic chance of doing a double.
I was really impressed with them. I thought they moved the ball really well, and they were very brave in how they moved the ball. They weren't just lumping it up the field. And I mean, some of the better teams around, you can see now, if an opposition drops back, they're able to play the ball across the field. They're able to sort of handball it through the middle of the field and wait until the right shot becomes available, or even just work the wings and take shots from there. So I was really impressed with them. I thought Simon Donoghue was very good, and they never backed down, and to be honest, they never looked in too much bother, really. Just a couple of other results then in Wexford, or the other result I have here: Nevena 117, Ferns St Aidan's 13 points, and Oulart de Bala against St Anne's 215 to 112. So Oulart haven't been county champions since 2016, but they're back into a semi-final now. And the semi-final,
this is definitely against the grain now. This is big time against the grain. Liam Dunn is manager, but this is a completely different Oulart team.
Yeah.
I actually got picture the match program of the Oulart intermediate team. So just these are all the players that basically are not available to Liam Dunn at the moment, or are not playing senior at the moment. Ben O'Connor, who was the goalie for that Leinster final winning team, I think. Heath Rossiter, Mick Jacob, Des Mighton, Rory Jacob, and amongst the subs are Stephen Doyle and Paul Roach. So these are all like they're household club names, and none of these guys are playing senior. So that definitely that result was definitely against the grain. Anns were in the county final last year. I believe Oulart were able to keep Dermot O'Keefe quiet enough, and I think Gareth Sinna had a fairly good game for Oulart, but that's definitely a surprise now.
And Oulart will play Nevena next Sunday, and Shelmaliers will play Glyn Barntown. So we'll see how they get on in those particular
Just
games.
on that one as well, we mentioned about John Myler and Derek McGrath, but Jason Ryan, the former Wexford manager and Kildare manager, is actually over Glyn Barntown. So that's a fairly another high profile manager. And he's one of these mad kind of managers in the sense that he's able to transfer. He's coach with Thomas Davis footballers in Dublin, and he's Glyn Barntown hurling manager. So it's funny, like, and he's very transferable. And just interesting as well, I thought it was you said you played Faythe Harriers with Cuala in recent weeks. And I don't know, like, I thought Faythe Harriers were well off the pace, and Derek McGrath kind of admitted as much. He said they need a couple of years. And I thought it was maybe strange then, or maybe there was some sense to it that G would be beaten at the weekend, and surprisingly beaten, because he said he had a fairly competitive match with Faythe Harriers. So I don't know, like, can you give me a bit of a rundown on the Cuala game in the Dublin Championship? Obviously high scoring game, but beaten well enough by Nefina.
Yeah, so the scoreline there was Nefina 323, Cuala 220. Now that was the last group game. Both teams were already through, but I think anyone who plays competitive sport realises you don't just down tools for the final group game. And yeah, the fact that I was thinking, geez, Faythe Harriers are flying it here, and you know, when they beat us, and then I go on and see how they lose so convincingly to Shelmaliers, that makes that result seem even worse. And maybe you're then thinking, right, well then maybe it's not such a shock that you're losing to Nefina. Now the first thing to say is Nefina have been a common team for a while, and they have a lot of talent on the team. And I was playing the Senior B match, which was on just after it, so obviously I didn't get to the different venue to watch that. But what I believe, and you know, some of the clips that I've seen, Nefina moved the ball beautifully. Colin Curry scored 9, Donald Burke scored 1-3, AJ Murphy 1-2, Sean Baxter 1-1. And they had 9 different scores, and lads who were able to score from all over the field. And just what I saw was that they were working the ball out really bravely. So you know the way we often talk about Limerick, and I'm not comparing Limerick with Nefina, but you know the way Limerick tend to give a stick pass to a guy who, you know, he might have a lad just behind him, but there's a bravery and a belief that I can hit you a stick pass when you're on your own 45 facing back towards your own goal. I'll give it to you, you'll turn, you'll be able to give it to someone else to move the ball up the field to the point when you can then pick a nice ball to an inside forward. And the full back line for Cuala was under an awful lot of pressure, from what I believe. So from the Nefina point of view, I think this is them sort of proving to themselves that we can be a team that can kick on and look to win a county title. And you can't ignore that, like scoring 323, 32 points, that's serious scoring at any level. So I think from their point of view, this is a day where they'll feel, yeah, we've landed and we can kick on from here. And the next round in the quarter-final, they'll be up against Fogs, and certainly I think Nefina will go in as heavy favourites. From a Cuala point of view, definitely not good enough, losing by 6 points and even getting a consolation goal from a free at the end, I think, from Sean Moore. Definitely not good enough. And I think all the lads would be, you know, to hold their hands up and say, we can't be playing like that. And you know, Con scores 5 points and Tracy scores 3 from play, and Sean Moore got 1-1 from play as well. But overall, very disjointed performance, and it's one of those things where you have to right the ship quickly and figure out where things are going wrong, because, you know, quarter-final against St. Bridget's, who pushed us very close in the county final last year. You know, it's from here on out, if you're going to lose that a final group game and concede 3-23, everyone else is going to fancy taking a pop off you too. That's just kind of the lay of the land, really, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, in fairness. Yeah, just going through some of the other results there. Whitehall, Columkill went down by a point to St. Jude's, looked like a belter, 317 to 316. St. Bridget's went down to Fogs by 2 points. Oliver Plunkett's and Ballantyre's St. John's drew. Another draw between Vincent's and Lucan. Kilmacud beat Scully Connell 323 to 19. Ballyboden beat Crave Kieran 220-210. Satanta 117, Thomas Davis 117, and a weekend of draws by the looks of things as well. Quarter-final draw is interesting. Nafina against Fogs, you said. Bridget's against Cuala. Kilmacud against Lucan, which would be tight enough as well, which would fancy Kilmacud to come through. And Vincent's against Ballyboden. So yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely set the cat amongst the pigeons. Nafina beating Cuala, I think it will offer a lot of other clubs a lot of hope going into knockout stages.
Yeah, and there's some tasty quarterfinals there, so I think those will be fixed in the next day or two. Moving on to the Galway Championship, you can't ignore the fact that Portumna are after getting relegated to Senior B. Now, we had a comment, I think it was I can't remember, was it YouTube or Twitter, but we had a commenter coming on basically telling us that Castlegar are going to win this by about 8 points at least, whether Canning plays or not. He'd obviously had a red card from the previous game, got it rescinded, so he was able to line out. And we were thinking, no, there'll be a point or two in this, but he's been fairly proven right.
Jeez, he has, definitely, yeah, in fairness. And Portumna finished with 13 men again. I think it was
2 games in a row. I mean, that's a shocker to lose 2 men in 2 games in a row.
Particularly a club game, like, you just can't afford to be without 13 men. I think at county level, sometimes teams are really, really well drilled, and you can sometimes make up for the loss of a man. You can't make up for the loss of a man at club level. You definitely can't make up for the loss of 2 as well. Joe's red card was obviously rescinded, but he didn't have as much of an impact on the game as they'd like. And Owen Concannon got 2 goals for Castlegar before he was actually sent off as well. But they got another goal each from Sean Leary and Jack Kynan. You know, comfortable victory, 12 points in the end. So our viewer was right in the statement that he made. Another team gone back to Senior B. Obviously, they don't have the 4 Club All-Irelands like Portumna have, but they have a Club All-Ireland in the relatively recent memory. It's Clarenbridge. They were beaten by Lee Mellows 216 to 13. Louis Mulqueen's side bouncing back again, beaten in the last 2 finals, obviously champions in 17. I think it was Angus Cannon still going strong, and Conor Hines got the goals. But Clarenbridge gone back to Senior B as well. So yeah, there's 2 fairly big hitters gone back to Senior B.
Yeah, Loughrea beat Captagal 116 to 112. Tommy Larkins, they had a 111 to 10 points win over Tina Abbey Denairi. Now, I'd be hoping that there was some massive wind or something like that led to such a low. That's like a Dower Ulster preliminary clash scoreline, isn't it? Like that's.
Yeah, no, it's very. That one really stood out for me as well. Actually, you're looking at like 22 scores over the course of an hour. I don't know if it was a gale or whatever that was. I don't know, but I'd say it was fairly turgid on the eyes now.
Yeah, Turlockmore, they beat Ormore Marie 121 to 11 points. Dahi Burke on form there, looking for a first county title since 1985. And we talked about other teams where, you know, you're coming and you eventually are going to have to deliver. It feels like Turlockmore, with their fail of success and the fact that they've looked like a common team for a long time, maybe it's time for them to step up and make it happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's loads of talent there. Dahi Burke's obviously captain this year as well. They're doing everything that they should be doing. Beat Mellows, beat Ormore Marie fairly convincingly. Ormore beat Clarenbridge by a point in the previous game. So, like, you'd imagine when Turlock played Clarenbridge in the last group game, they should win fairly convincingly as well. So it looks like they're doing everything they can. Ormore obviously managed by double All-Ireland winner Jerry McInerney and his son Gerard, obviously, and Niall Burke could be leading it there, but they were no match for Turlockmore at the weekend.
St. Thomas's, they beat Sarsfields 22 points to 118, so obviously just by the minimum there. Conor Cooney, he hit 14 points, and Thomas is looking for a 3 in a row. Gort, they beat Kinvara convincingly enough, 121 to 14 points. Aidan Hellebert with 14. Manager Matt Murphy, the former Galway manager, he's in there defeating their neighbours. And then just a quick run through a couple of other results. Ardrahan beat Athenry 321 to 18 points. Crockwell 224, Ballandereen 411, Mulla 114, Pádraig Pearse is 15, Clymer Daly 219, Baha 13 points, and Ahaskra Fahina 220, Kilnadima Leitrim 119. Right, we'll move into the Tipperary Championship. So just to go through, like, there's obviously a lot of fixtures going on at the moment with all the group stages, but we'll run through them here and just stop and just touch on a couple of points. So Killadangan beat Roscrea. Killadangan had drawn with JK Brackens in the first round, so they're back on track here with a 219 to 14 points win over Roscrea with their second defeat in a row. Dan O'Mara and Brian Mallochny with the goals there. Holy Cross Ballycahill, they beat Aero Gannacarty Donahill 23 points to 118. What stood out in this game is Cathal Barrett further out the field, just the 8 points from play.
Outrageous, isn't it? He was in attack. He must have been everywhere. He must have been absolutely everywhere. But the 8 points from play in like a junior game is an achievement. But 8 points from play in a senior championship game is it's unbelievable for a lad that doesn't normally play up there. But he's that comfortable on the ball. You could play him anywhere realistically. Like you could see him like being a good corner forward at club level.
Yeah, without doubt. A fixture or a result that really stood out to me was, and not because you wouldn't expect Drummond Inch to beat neighbours JK Brackens, but that they had a red card after 2 minutes to Johnny Springer Ryan and still went on to win 216 to 115. Now there's a clip doing the rounds of Seamus Callanan doing what must be a 50-yard solo up the line into the corner flag more or less and blasting it over. I don't think he can be more than 10 or 14 yards away from the end line, and he blasted over straight off the stick. I mean, he doesn't even take it back into the hand, just the pace of the man. But to do that... Put a link of
that up, will you, underneath, because I haven't even seen that yet, and I wouldn't mind getting a look at it.
yeah, I'll try and get that up. But that's a fair win, 216 to 115 over a Brackens team that would be feeling fairly good about itself after drawing with Killadangan, and to be honest, probably could have just held on. Clonulty Rossmore, they had a very eye-catching result over Nina Aero, winning by 6 points, 122 to 116. Now this was a repeat of the 2018 county final. Cathal Burke, Dylan Quirk and Conor Hammersley, all good players. Apparently they made a nice impact in around the middle quarter of the field. Timmy Hammersley scored 13 points, 3 from play. So Clonulty putting the county on notice that they're a serious contender.
Well, I was at the county final 2 years ago, and I only seen the small little bits of information about this game, but it looks the exact same as the county final. Timmy Hammersley puts up a massive score, 10 of them frees, a couple from play, and a couple of their big players play well around the middle, and Nina totally misfire. That's basically what that looks like. And really, really poor result from Nina, given the talent that they have at their disposal. They seem to be another one of these teams, no more than a Clonlara in Clare or Ballymun in Dublin football, that just don't seem to be maximising the talent that they have at their disposal. They're definitely underachieving, without a doubt.
Kilruan McDonough's, they got back on the road with a 321 to 219 win over McCarthy Burris. So Kilruan had obviously completely faded out against Thurles Sarsfields, losing the last quarter of the game by 1-8 to a point. So Sars running away with the points there. Keane O'Kelly, Keane Darcy and Jerome Cahill got the goals here. So that'll set up a brilliant, mouth-watering last day clash against Lockmore and Kilruan McDonough's. We'll come to that again in a minute, but we'll just run through a few more results. Bursley beat Burgess 323 to 114. So JD Devaney with 2 goals and Brendan Maher with a goal from a free for the county champions. Upper Church Drumban, they drew with Toomevara 317 to 123. So that's 2 draws for Toom. So they're, I think, in the group setting, they're on 2 points, and both Upper Church and Bursley are on 3 points now. But Toomevara was fancy beating Burgess in the last game, so then it'll be all about what happens between Bursley and Upper Church. And then finally, on Friday night last, Thurles Sarsfields had a 228 to 25 point win over Lockmore Castellini. I was fairly impressed with Thurles Sarsfields. They looked a bit more like the old Thurles, using the ball well. Paddy and Ronan Maher obviously getting on top an awful lot. A couple of nice goals from Pa Burke as well. I think Thurles Sars could nearly be installed as favourites here.
They look back to the form of a couple of years ago. They look stung from not being in the equation the last couple of years. Again, like the talent that they have, like between the Matters, Mickey Cahill, Billy McCarthy, Aidan McCormick, Lara coming off the bench as well. They've loads of talent, loads. Like the summer hurling suit any team more than it would suit Thurles. You'd be hard pressed to find a team that the style that they play like they don't have like Dennis. They even have the outlet of Dennis Matter as a real long ball if they have to. But they have a lot of really really good ball players who are very very quick as well. So yeah, no, you'd have to. I think you'd have to put them in as favourites. Yeah. Any hunger that they may have not had in previous years definitely looks like it's shown this year.
Yeah, and I think Lockmore will need a little bit. They'll need to get Noel McGrath on the ball a little bit more. He'll need to find ways of getting himself in the game a little bit more. Obviously, they want John McGrath on the ball at all times as well. John Maher was hurling very well at wing back for them, but that Lockmore against Killarwan game, that's a very tasty one. And like the way we talked about Turlockmore and we have about Nafina, Killarwan, you know, they need to be stepping up. They need to be winning soon. And to be honest, do you know what? This is probably the right game for them at the right time, because they'll see, you know, what are we made of in this game.
Well, it's sink or swim really. They're playing against a good side. If they get a win, the momentum that, you know, the bubble being burst against Thurles will kind of be forgotten about, and they'll have a lot of momentum going into the knockout stages. If they lose, it's a disastrous season really. There's no point in saying any different. I wouldn't have been overly impressed. Like, I thought they should have been having my Carkey Boris at maybe, you know, arm's length to the tune of about 10 points. Been honest with you, that's just me. Haven't come up against Killarwan and know what they have at their disposal, but they have a chance to turn around their season. Noel Larkin, who was involved with Galway when the All-Ireland in 17, is over Killarwan. They have a good side, they have a really really good attack. Lads that can really really hurt you. But yeah, it's sink or swim time for them against Lockmore.
Okay, and there's plenty of other championships at the weekend, like in Antrim. Dunloy had a 17 points apiece draw with Ballycastle. A wonder score from Keelan Malloy in the 5th minute of injury time salvaged a point there for Dunloy. Kieran Clark apparently very good for Ballycastle. Neil McCall setting up as a sweeper. Lochgiel and Cushendall, 213 to 210 win for Lochgiel, so there'll be a fair old rivalry there, so that won't go down too well in Cushendall. St. Gall's, they beat Nevena 217 to 12 points, and St. John's, they beat O'Donovan Rossa by a point, 18 points to 114. Running into the Clare Championship, then far end of the country, Ballyea beat Clooney Quinn very handily, 228 to 011. Tony Kelly hit 1-7 and Niall Deasy put over 13 points. O'Callaghan's Mills beat Crusheen well enough, 317 to 17 points. Normally Crusheen wouldn't allow that much of a scoreline against them, so that's eye-catching enough. Broadford beat Clonlara. Your Clonlara, the team you love to slate, beat them 17 points to 15, so all that talent in Clonlara still not fully clicking. 6 Mile Bridge beat Whitegate 20 points to 113, so that's the Davy Fitz against Brendan Bugler, who plays for Whitegate. And actually Whitegate had gone 3 points to 0 up after 2 minutes, but Alex Morey with his 11 points, and then other scorers for 6 Mile Bridge included Shane Morey, Jamie Shanahan, Shane Golden. Like, these are all guys with county experience, so it's no surprise.
Funny, Davy was down in Wexford yesterday when I was there as well. He was doing commentary on the radio, and I think he was waiting around for the last of the quarterfinals yesterday evening as well. So a busy old weekend for him. Yeah, but they're doing what you expect them to do. Really, they're going to be really really in the hunt again. Obviously, going for 2 in a row. Yeah,
Fecal, they battered Clarecastle 520 to 212. Kilmaley beat Wolf Tones 413 to 117. And Ina Kilnamona came through against Newmarket and Fergus by 121 to 114. Now, Cork Championship in the Piershig, they beat St Finbarrs. Obviously, St Finbarrs had been beaten handily enough by Glen Rovers, so that's been, I mean, their poor season has been underlined by a fairly hefty 12-point defeat here to the Piershig. Blackrock, they beat Newtown Shandram 226 to 214, 12-point defeat there. Sarsfields, they bet Douglas 415 to 122, so narrow enough defeat. And Glen Rovers, who we'd mentioned there, they had a 2-point win over Carricktoohill, 118 to 116. Conor Doris scored 1-5, Patrick Horgan scored 8 points, albeit just 1 from play. Dean Brosnan with a couple. Simon Kennefick, who we talked about, he got just a point here, and Liam Gosnell got 1-6 for Carricktoohill. Just a couple more results then. Aaron's Own beat Bishopstown and Middleton beat Ballyhay. In Down, Ballycran, they saw off Portaferry, and Ballygalget beat Breda. And then the Limerick Championship, Kilmallock 222, Ahan 313, Doon 21 points, Patrickswell 215, that's a draw, and Ballybrown 525, Gary Spillane 111. So Doon missing out on a semi-final place with that draw against Patrickswell.
Yeah, and I think they were 4 up going into injury time, and like, they would have straight through to a semi-final if they'd won that game. and the draw is after earning the Cuala place in the semi-final. But in fairness, Doon are still in it. They go back into a quarter-final. Small bit deflating, going back into the quarter-final when they had their fingers on a semi-final place. But I think Aaron Gillan got an injury time goal to snatch a draw. And just in a couple of the other championships there as well, in Meath, Trim beat Killeen 3-17 to 12 points. Clondegale and Kilmessan drew. Nafina 122 and Avon O'Mahony's 2-9. Kildalkey and Kiltale, who be the real top teams there in Meath at the moment. Kildalkey won 17 to 112. And then Roscommon, St Dominic 16, Oran 10 points. Four Roads, obviously traditional powerhouse in Roscommon, 118. Paulie Pierce's 113. And Tremaine 320 at League 116. A fair whack of hurling last weekend. It's great.
There's any amount of fairly hard to keep on top of the whole lot of it, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, in fairness. Yeah, it's funny though. The Wexford Championship is getting so much more coverage than other championships because they're at knockout stages already, whereas a lot of other counties are only in the early rounds. But just from chatting to a lot of people in Wexford, they seem to be really, really happy with hurling now in this block, and then football now, because I don't think there is a bigger dual county in Ireland than Wexford. The amount of senior dual clubs and the amount of lads that are actually playing both codes. But yeah, sure, it's great. Perfect conditions all over the weekend, nearly the whole weekend. And just with that GPA proposal from last week, it's interesting. Club players, hurlers and footballers are getting exposure at this time of the year that they wouldn't normally get. And they'll have a fair taste for it. And I'd say they were licking their lips at that GPA proposal the other day, which would see them back in action probably in early July and by early August at the latest.
Yeah, and just a quick word on your own championship in Offaly. Obviously that's been put back for at least 3 weeks now because of the outbreak of COVID-19 and the lockdown within Offaly, Laois and Kildare. From your own point of view, I know you're injured, so in some ways it's like almost kind of convenient for you in a way, but obviously it's very worrying in the county, and in other respects too, you wonder, will the championships get finished?
Yeah, we're a long way away from where the clusters are, in Eden Derry, where the main cluster is. We're like, Eden Derry's closer to Dublin than it is to Pore. Do you know what I mean? So it's worrying though, from the sense of like a timetable was made out for when the fixtures were going to go ahead, and that's basically going to have to be ripped up now. So there's an awful lot of confusion now about when things are going to happen. Again, the dual clubs are really, really going to suffer because the likes of Ferban and Belmont, St. Rynas and that are going to be playing. They could be playing a hurling match here and they could be playing a football match 4 days later. I don't know. It's going to be very, very messy. There's also the worry about whether it will actually get back going again, and whether there's going to be, other counties locked down in future. But I think that, I don't know, I don't think it made much sense for the GA to come out late on Friday night and basically close all GA grounds in Laois, Kildare and Offaly. I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you. Like, letting teams train away as normal. Like, there's been no real problems with regards to GA, and everyone is very cognizant of the fact that they have to be really, really careful and obviously not come next or near the field if you're sick or anything like that. So I'm not too sure if that was wise.
And we have the tracker app too, so I think that was the whole idea, so that you could localize these things and not close down huge areas if something was concentrated in another area. Then at the flip side, obviously there's medical or health experts out there, so who are we to really kind of talk down to them? But at the same time, we'll monitor the situation, see how it goes. Thank you very much, Michael. Great stuff. We'll chat again soon.
Cheers, Shane. Good man.